Hello and welcome to BPG TV. I'm Michael Lister and he's Paul Gofton. And today's intro is going to be golden as I'm flying solo.
That's right, Michael. Today we're going down to a work site in Christchurch to speak to Kevin Woods from Site Safety, who's going to tell us all about...
I think you're doing it. Aren't you the roving reporter?
Great, thanks, Michael. I'm outside a work site in Christchurch this morning. Beautiful day. Speaking to Kevin Wood, who's a safety, health and environmental advisor for Site Safe.
Hi.
Thanks, Kevin. Great to meet you. Basically, imagine I don't know anything about site safety. What's the most important things we need to think about?
Well, Paul, the things we have to think about, or the main thing we have to think about, is looking at hazard identification and hazard management. Before we go into site, we need to be prepared. We've got to make sure we've got training and qualifications and competency.
Paul, can you find out what training experiences and qualifications actually mean?
That's a great question. Thanks, Michael. What does it actually mean to be competent, Kevin?
Got to make sure you've got the right skill sets for the job you've been asked to do, and where you haven't got the experience, then you have to be supervised.
Great, and where's that information kept, Kevin?
Ideally in a training and competency register on site.
That's great, Kevin. What's next?
Okay, Paul, we're almost onto site now, but what we have to consider is PPE.
Oh yeah, I know this one. No PPE, no play. Simple as.
It's the old script.
Anyway.
Personal protective equipment, Paul. Safety helmet, safety footwear, eye protection, hearing protection and high vis.
Great, I'll get changed then.
Best you do.
Great, so I've got my PPE on now, Kev. What's next?
Okay, Paul, we're almost onto the site now. We need to make sure that when we arrive on site that we sign in and we do an induction. That includes things like emergency procedures, looking at what hazards are on site. We may need to review the hazard board and then looking at how we report accidents and incidents.
Great, thanks, Kev.
For more information, go to the Builder's Pocket Guide website.
Okay, we have Steve from Davron Scaffolding here to talk about the hazards of scaffolding and working at height, as it's one of the major risks that we have to consider whilst on a construction site. Over to you, Steve.
For me, in all scaffold projects, there's three key areas that shouldn't be compromised. The first one is that the scaffold is fit for purpose and that it meets all the client's requirements. Secondly, that it's compliant and it'll have such things as a handrail, a mid-rail, a kickboard, and also that we use the best practice guideline for scaffolding as the minimum requirement. And thirdly, is that it has an inspection card and is regularly inspected daily by the principal and on a weekly basis by the scaffold company.
Thanks very much, Steve.
Great, so I've got my PPE on now, Kev. I've had my hazard identification. I know what the hazards are on site. I've been inducted. I've had some training if I need it. What's next?
Okay, if you remember from the induction, they talked about policies and procedures with regards to reporting accidents and incidents. They would go in the accident register. If there was a serious harm accident, we'd need to notify WorkSafe New Zealand.
What does that mean, Kev?
Best thing with regards to serious harm is to refer to the WorkSafe New Zealand's website for the latest information with regards to how to report a serious harm and do the investigation. Health and safety is everybody's responsibility, and we need to make sure that we do daily checks before we start work, looking for new hazards or looking at near misses that have been reported. Where we identify hazards and they're not being controlled, we report those to our manager and we can write them in the hazard register, and then we won't start work until they've been adequately controlled. It's important that we also report things like accidents and near misses through to our manager.
Why do you report near misses, Kev?
A near miss is that almost accident whereby somebody hasn't got hurt but they could have got hurt, so therefore we need to investigate those to ensure that we can prevent a similar sort of situation arising in the future. Okay, Paul, that covers the basic hazard management requirements for the site. What have you remembered from today?
That's a great question, Kevin, and you've been a great instructor today. The first point is hazard identification. Next is training and competency and supervision, personal protective equipment, moving on to inductions, emergency procedures, signage, reporting, daily checks and audits.
Oh, good job today, Paul, well done. Just remember that leadership drives the performance, and what we can do is work as a team, so the workers will help with regards to wearing personal protective equipment, working with their boss to identify hazards that are not being controlled, and speak up if they're not happy with their work environment so that everybody can go home at the end of the day.
Thanks, Kev, to you and SiteSafe. You're doing a great job here in Christchurch and New Zealand. Back to the studio.
We're here with Steve Moran from WorkSafe New Zealand to talk more about site safety in the residential sector. Hi, Steve.
Hi there, thanks for the opportunity to come and speak on your video, firstly. In a sector like the residential sector, historically the injury rates have not been good in that sector, it's well known. Actually, more recently we're seeing huge improvements in the residential sector, which is fantastic, around hazard identification, that's key. That also the controls are in place, which would include training of employees, information for employees and PPE. At WorkSafe, well, I know it's one of our goals that everyone who goes to work comes home safely at the end of the day. I think working together with agencies such as ECan and with industry, together we can make that happen.
Excellent. So it is important that together we work collaboratively to make sure that everyone does get home safe at the end of the day. For more information, go to the Builder's Pocket Guide website.